Good afternoon, good morning. I've got that back to front. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode 8 of the Inside Out Effect podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Jakes, and I'm a neuro reboot technician and a therapist, and I use the DTO system, which was absolutely created by alongside me, the wonderful, the gorgeous, the bearded, the inspirational Jonathan Shaw. So hello, Jonathan, how are you?
Hello, Steve. I'm good, mate. Thank you. How are you?
I'm
I like
very
the bearded. I've not heard the bearded before.
Bearded,
the bearded, it's new.
Yeah.
You're bearded as well now.
I am actually getting quite bearded.
You are bearded, yeah.
I know. You prefer. We've got a guest with us who prefers it as well, but we'll introduce him in a minute. So the weather's great. Not a cloud in the sky here in sunny Essex. And today, as promised in our last podcast, we're going to talk about grief and how that affects us. And so we called this particular podcast Grief Decoded. And so in this podcast, we'll be discussing grief in a bit more detail. And in particular, we'll be covering the 2 myths about grief, the cost of holding on to your grief, and obviously the real cause of why we hang on to our grief. And we'll be covering that with Jonathan in a minute. But before we actually go into the content or the body of the podcast, we've got a little bit of a treat here today because we've got a guest who's come in, who's I like to call him the Michelangelo of copywriting. He's also a podcaster and also a very, very good friend of mine that over the last year I've developed a very good friendship with him and a good relationship. So I'd like to introduce Adil Amarsi. So hello Adil, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey Stephen, thanks for having me, and glad to be part of the bearded group today. All three of us
are all bearded, aren't we? We're all bearded, yeah.
All 3 of us are bearded,
yes. Different stages of growth. It's I got kind of the whole dark beard going. We got Jonathan kind of slowly fading into the grey, and then we got Stephen just going, it's going straight on salt on this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
with a little pepper as well. There's a little pepper in there.
There is a little bit of pepper in there. And,
I'm going for the cross between Jesus and Santa in his early 20s.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's my look. That's where I'm going with this. So,
Jesus Claus, basically.
Yes, that's Jesus Claus. You shortened it. See, massive copyright.
Yeah,
he just took the whole joke and really shortened it into that really succinct.
Yeah, I know.
Brilliant. I'm going to use that now. I'm going to put it on my website. I'm Jesus Claus. That's fantastic.
Jesus Claus. I like it.
Excellent.
Okay, so anyway, I've had the pleasure of working with Adil, like I said, for about the last year. We both shared. I was involved in the reboot program, which we do with our friend Greg. All 3 of us have done the program.
Yeah, you were actually at mine as well.
I helped.
You were in the person that helped me with mine.
Yeah, I helped you with the reboot, and I'd only just finished that after about a week, I think, and then I helped you with yours. So, so that was really interesting. And then over a period of time, I've developed a good friendship with Adil, and Adil's helping us with our new business launch of Inside Out Effect with the copywriting and the marketing. He's very, very good, and I recommend his services to anybody that's listening. But that's not really why we're here.
Yeah, that's not the reason.
The reason why we're here. So obviously, you've allowed me into your world, and obviously I use the DTO system. We're helping many people with their problems, ranging from depression, anxiety, or all different issues, using Jonathan's DTO system that he's developed. And so obviously I would like just to for you to maybe share 1 or 2 of your experiences with the results of what we've been doing and working together, because I think I get the impression that a lot of people may not quite understand what it is we do, how it works, and what impact it actually has, and actually that what we do is actually possible. It's very hard for people to comprehend exactly what it is. I think you probably have the same.
That is the biggest problem, to recognise that actually what we do is possible because of what we get taught.
Yeah.
That you have to live with your problems, or you have to be stuck with your problems, or you can't change your thoughts, you can't change how you feel about something. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So when you try and explain that it is possible to somebody, naturally their beliefs in their head get challenged quite a bit, and they're kind of I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook itself, just if you go through Facebook alone, just the memes that you get of all of this anxiety and depression is real, and it's a disease, and all of this. The problem with those is that actually keeps people stuck and think that they're going to have it for the rest of their life, and it's who they are, and they've got it, and they're never going to get rid of it. And ultimately, with the system that you've developed, totally and utterly debunks that, because we're healing people with anxiety and depression all the time, every day, trauma and all the rest of it. So we're going to move on to Adil. So welcome, Adil. So just share with the viewers really your experiences and tell them about yourself. And
well, I'll actually just jump right in, because again, this episode is titled Grief Decoded. So I'm going to give 2 stories. One that isn't grief, one that is to do with my own personal thing that I went through with you.
Yeah.
And the other is actually one that actually solidified the belief. Now, so for me, I already know that it worked. I knew it worked the first time we did it because, well, the weird, I'm very, very visual. So the weird descriptions I gave you of what I was seeing when I went into that visual cortex for myself, you're like, seriously, pink lemonade? That's what you're seeing?
That's right, yeah.
So it's kind of weird because it actually has to do with the grief. Now, just very quickly, I know you guys are going to be talking more about grief in the sense of, I'm assuming, loss of people or like that, or is it going to be like grief as in like just generally grief?
Well, grief covers many things. It's
Yeah.
always, it can be loss of a loved one, it can be loss of a pet, it can be just a breakup of a relationship.
Yeah, breakup.
It actually generally feels all the same. You can't actually tell the difference when you're experiencing a grief.
Oh, yeah. So, like, one of the things that Stephen really helped me out with was, so the one that's, for me, the story that's going to share with you guys, the experience I had was getting over an ex. But not so much in that way. It was more rooted in the self-esteem arena of, like, feeling like I'm not worthy. And, so that really hit me. So right away with, like, not feeling worthy, followed up by me and you having that discussion that, hey, what if this is much deeper? What's the linchpin to it?
Yeah.
And I think we went all the way back down to me being at 4 years old, running onto the swing set, being chastised by, the jungle gym, being chastised by my teacher.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that now. Yes.
Yeah. See, I can talk about that, and there is no emotional reaction to it. And like Jonathan's looking at me right now, and I'm very aware because before this, I said something, and his response was, "Hey, do you know that you actually are triggered by this and this?" I was like, I had no clue, so it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
There's no emotional reaction to it whatsoever. I just remember it was a thing that happened, and I was like, yeah, fair enough. And then you and I sat down with it, and I don't know, like 15 minutes later, if that, it just was gone. And you were asking me, hey, what does that visual memory look like? And I was like, I can't find the memory. I mean, it's reconstituted, but all I can see it as, honestly, is I still see the pink champagne leather chair. And it's not even me, just some random kid sitting on a stool somewhere is all I see. I'm like, that doesn't even look like he's white, I'm brown. That's how weird it is. That response is.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like what I've even from my own personal experiences of when I first started out with Jonathan and when I do now is that a lot of the things and when I work on myself is that what happens is that you sort of the memory loses its charge. It loses its emotional charge, and so once those memories lose their emotional charge, they become very, very distant and they become outside of you and they're no longer inside. It's not inside in you affecting you. So if you can imagine it being inside you and when you think about it or when you see something or unconsciously triggering you, it will create that emotion inside of you which makes you react or behave in a certain way. But with the DTO system and what we do in DTO and actually being able to switch this stuff off ultimately takes that memory outside of you. So now it's very difficult to be triggered inside of the memory. It feels like the memories come outside of you. And one of the things I always say to my clients when I think I've cleared the issue is, does that feel inside of you or does it feel outside of you? And when they say no, that feels outside of me, I know that I've cleared it. And so that was just really what I'm saying. So it just really takes all the emotional charge out of the memory.
Oh, yeah, it's really weird. Just kind of like for the skeptics in the crowd that might be thinking this, which is fine. I'm one of them. And this is why it felt weird. Because when you were telling me that, it's like clearing up your hard drive and all this, that, the other, I was like, bullshit. I've heard that so many times. Excuse my language, I do swear a lot. I'm trying my best not to, but like, that's what comes up. Is like, I'm like, that's complete BS. Even when I went through Reboot with Gregory, the only reason I did it was because I finally found someone that understood like how my brain worked and could help me.
Yeah.
And even then I was like, I'm seeing some of the positive effects here, but is it as good as blah, whatever it is? And then when you basically helped me with this, it just like skyrocketed what I'm feeling at like such a rapid rate combined with what I did in Reboot. Now, something I did want to say was like where it really made sense for me wasn't so much when it happened to me. It's when it happened to my friend.
Yeah.
So, like, the story is basically I had Stephen work with one of my friends because whenever I find something that works, I'm just a proponent of telling everyone about it.
Yeah.
Especially if it'll help them, and this freaking helps everyone that I've met so far. So I had you work with my friend who's going to remain anonymous, and they actually had a lot of anxiety and self-confidence issues, which surprisingly, same thing that we were talking about.
Yeah,
but
very
that
much.
thing was, theirs was more rooted in being not picked, if I remember correctly, something to do with their class.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff. She'd lost her job and she had a load of self-worth issues and she couldn't get over losing a job and she hadn't been able to get a job for a year and all of that was triggering all of her self-worth issues from when she was a child.
Yeah.
She literally, all of that kind of accumulated into one big meltdown for her and she struggled in her.
Oh, yeah, but the crazy thing was when I came back downstairs. The change I saw in her was incredible.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, wow, this is actually a thing that happened.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. So while it validated it for myself, and this is kind of thing, sometimes when something happens and it works for me, it kind of validates it because it's like, okay, it worked. But then also my brain goes, maybe it just worked because it's me.
Yeah.
And then when I see it happen to someone else that I personally know, that I know their shit quite well, and I see it change them, it's like, it's mind-bogglingly awesome.
Yeah, I mean, because
I can't say that word. I can't say mind-boggle.
Mind-boggling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We found a word I can't say.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You can't say it.
Yeah, mind-boggling.
But,
there we go. It's back.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember when I first when I turned up to your house in London, and I said to her, and you introduced me to her. So I said hi. I said, hi, how you doing? I'm Steve. And then she just started crying her eyes out.
Yeah.
I mean, before I'd even she was, and then by the end of it, she was sitting on the sofa giggling like a.
Oh yeah, because that was the funny thing she actually said to me as well that very few people, like, I don't think I've even told you.
Yeah.
Is she said, if he can get me from crying to laughing, I'll know it will work. And she was that was the other thing. She said that she's never, and she was crying. That was the thing. She said she's never cried from happiness.
Yeah.
She's only ever cried from sadness. And she was laughing so much she started crying on the sofa.
That's
and
right,
she threw something at me for that as well. That was fun.
Yeah.
It was a pillow. It wasn't anything sharp.
Yeah.
That's all right. That's
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, it's like, this DTO system is. I mean, I've yet to fail with it. I don't get all of it, the whole problem cleared up sometimes because obviously there's much more deeper rooted issues and there's other things that connect to it. But as a rule, I mean, things get cleared up very quickly depending on what it is and how severe it is. We won't talk about the trauma again, but that I cleared in a very record time. but you know, it really depends. And you're going. Who's going to say something?
So I was going to ask. I believe from what Steve's told me that you tried a lot of things and you're into self-development. You tried a lot of things before. What had you actually tried before to?
Oh man, if I'm going to
improve yourself,
I'm going to let's list it in different ways. So just to give you guys an idea, I went from being very unconfident, very shy around people. Like, I had a very, very huge I used to shut my body down. Like, you can see it now with the way my physiology works, is I have to actively keep my shoulders back because naturally I want to slump over and make myself feel small.
Yeah.
So you got to realize from that up until I was about 18, I started out with Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar. That was like my first lot. Then it was, you know, the usual mindset stuff with Think and Grow Rich and all the other fun stuff. And I never really sat well with those books. And of course Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. Great book.
It's a great book actually, yeah.
Actually one of the true self-development books that doesn't get enough praise in my opinion, but it's a great book that actually works. But then I went from that, then I went and did I read a bunch of stuff. I started working in sales, I started working in marketing, I started upgrading my thought processes. The crazy
you
thing
you did the NLP as well, didn't you? You learned NLP as well.
I did my first 3. I got up to my timeline therapy.
Yeah, I'm got qualified in that.
Yeah, timeline hypnotherapy. That's the last stage. Because then I didn't go for my master's because at that point it was too much. I didn't have any money at the time. Yeah. But in that time, I'm constantly improving. I try Tony Robbins' NAC or my friend's affirmations. Yeah. Just everything you think of under the sun to try and fix this. The problem I was having was the best way I can say is a rubber band. I was trying to run away from myself, but I wasn't fully broken free because I was still pulling back to myself. I was running away from who I was.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was about 25 I started working with someone, and the first bit of sense they actually made to me was you need to reconcile the child, the teenager in you, because basically what you've done is to protect yourself as a child from growing up, you had to have this really weird exterior. The problem is that you start to hate the thing that protected you, and you need to collapse it all. Which sounds esoteric in essence with the 3 cells, but again, it helped, it worked out. I made peace with it.
Yeah.
But even then, I would still go back to sabotaging. And the weirdest thing I could ever say to anyone, and I think you guys would actually be able to relate to this, it's the idea of, I know I'm great at what I do. I know I'm good at what I do. I'm really confident. But at the same time, I don't believe in any of it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it, even though you know it.
And my personal favorite to that is if someone else comes up to you and goes, yeah, you're terrible at this. You're like, oh yeah, let's go. I'm going to tell you how good I am. You really will defend your position.
Yes.
The only problem is, if you say that to yourself, you believe it entirely. It's like the weirdest thing. Like someone else says it, you get really like defensive. And, you show yourself, how you are. But if it's to yourself, you completely placate and like downplay. And that happened for a really long time. Then I went through Reboot, which is amazing because I think the first thing you did within the first 3 or 10 seconds of meeting me was write down your first note was unable to emotionally.
Yeah, I got you.
I
got you in about 10 seconds, I think.
Yeah,
I was walking in the room. I knew.
Yeah, you're just like emotionally despondent. No,
emotionally suppressed.
That's the one, suppressed. Yeah. And then at the end of it, I cried. That was amazing. And then fast forward to, I'd say about March, April this year.
Yeah, about March, April.
Yeah, we came up with like 2019.
That's when you moved into your new lovely place. Yeah,
yeah.
So that's when we started.
Yeah, so it's from there that I basically went and started working on these little things, and I've just been seeing I've seen improvements, both drastic and also in short term, and they've just been amazing. So I appreciate everything. There's something I will tell you guys off air a little bit later, but it's really impacted so many things in my life positively.
Yeah, because I mean, you not only does it affect once you switch off this stuff that's been going on in your past or in your present or whatever's going on for you. Emotionally, you become free of it. Yeah. So instantly now, you've not got that running in your life. So you're free of that. It's disappeared. It's no longer bugging you. It's not even in your thoughts. It's gone away. But also, by removing that, you're now removing the thing that drives the behaviour. So now your behaviour changes as well. So just by removing it, not only do you feel better, but your life changes because the behaviour changes. And then ultimately, that just the more that you do that, the more it sort of compounds like interest, it just gets, it starts to really expand and starts to grow. And from my own personal experience from where I was, every time I do something or work with you and remove stuff, I just get less and less and less and less triggered by stuff, and I'm just in so much more of a peaceful, happier place, and that's really where what the benefit of what we do does.
Oh, massively. It's just when you find.
And the important thing is it happens naturally.
Yeah.
You don't have to do the affirmations or the affirmations. You don't have to do the meditation. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with meditation. It's great, but you don't have to do it to maintain a peaceful, happy state. There is no maintaining of that state. You just become.
Once it's gone, it's gone, and that's it. I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. There's I can't really say it any other way.
It's basically like if you got like honey on your finger, and like, are you gonna spend absolutely are you gonna go there, wash it off, wash your fingers, make sure you like completely get it off, and then go, okay, is my finger still sticky? Is it still there? Is it okay? Is the honey still on my skin? You don't have that anymore. It's the equivalent of this is the equivalent of washing your hands. Like if you had honey on your thumb and you put it in your mouth and then you pull it back out, it will stay sticky. Like it would constantly, you'd feel that adhesive effect. It would never be clean because you haven't run it under water, you haven't washed it off, you haven't done anything. And that's what I would say traditional self-development feels like, is you're basically putting your thumb in your mouth with honey on it just to basically kind of like placate and be like, yeah, I'm making progress, I'm fine. And then going, why is my thumb still sticky? But with this, it's like you feel like you've washed your hands and you've just cleaned it all off that you don't have to worry about.
I mean, I think there's something.
That's a really good analogy.
That is good analogy.
That's brilliant. That's a brilliant analogy.
We just came up sticky fingers.
Yeah.
Right, sticky fingers. The sticky finger analogy.
Yes. It's not that kind of a show. It's a different topic.
Yeah. I was going honey fingers, but fair enough.
Okay, that's fine.
So the other thing as well that what you mentioned there was like. It's like cleaning your hard drive. Yeah. And I think it's a really great analogy as well because it's sort of what actually happens. So if you imagine your mind being a hard drive and it's it's got all of these viruses in there, and you can just literally remove the viruses. You run a program, the DTO program, which is what we do, and then we basically clean that virus and it cleans it up and it goes. It literally cleans up your hard drive, and then the more you do, the more you're defragging your hard drive back to a perfect state. And
exactly.
And I think that's another good analogy as well. So anyway, well, thanks for joining us, Adil, and we're going to get on to the rest of the podcast now.
I'm looking forward to listen to it.
Yeah, great. And so this is where we're now going to hear more of Jonathan's voice and his understandings and his learnings and what he's done to help many people out of grief in the past and how it can affect us. And like I said, we'll be discussing in detail the 2 myths about grief, the cost of holding on to your grief, and the real cause of why we hold on to it. And so let's get you back into the fold, Jonathan. Good afternoon, my friend, and I hope you're enjoying the sunshine.
It's beautiful. It's been really warm for the past few days. In fact, it's been so warm. My clinic has been a little bit too hot. And
sticky fingers.
Some of my favourite clients have been roasting. Well, the whole body's been sticky in my clinic. Their whole body's been sticking. It's been a little bit hot. But no, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's nice to actually be out in a sunshine day and
nice
be here chatting with you and Adil no, I've had a really good couple of days with some clients, and it's been really helped a lot of people, and it's been really good.
Any successes you want to share? I mean, I've got one or two that I might want to talk about, but for you, anything of significance which you would like to share with somebody who might be listening?
Well, I work a lot with pain. I've just helped a young girl who's 15 who had a chronic headache for 13 months, and she went to everybody. She went to osteopaths and neurologists and acupuncture and doctors and psychologists, and no one knew what was wrong, and no one could help her. And within 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks, she's now 70% better and totally on her way to complete recovery.
That's great.
And she can now function because she couldn't do exams, she couldn't function on what she wanted to do, she couldn't do her sports. And as her mum said, she felt she'd lost her daughter because the sparkle and the happiness was just drained out of her because having a headache constantly. I'm sure everyone listening has experienced a headache at some point.
Yeah.
You imagine that every day of your life for 13 months. That's horrible. And it's no wonder that it was drained out of her. But after a few weeks and just doing a few simple things, one, clearing the stress out of her system, but two, finding what was actually going on with her physically, and she actually had 3 trapped nerves in her body. And by releasing those and releasing the stress over a period of time, she's finally healing and she's getting back to normal. And I will say she was very sceptical about the stress. Although she was kind of open to it, she was still very sceptical about how it could have been caused, because in her head it was caused by a treatment that she had from a therapist and the injury that she sustained during her sport. And because it happened after those two things, she perceived it was those that were the cause of the problem. Those things are never the cause of the problem. They might trigger off the problem, but they're not the cause. And so by addressing the cause, the stress and the trapped nerves, we've been able to release her pain. And she's done absolutely fantastic. And her mum says, she said to me, she's now got her daughter back because the sparkle's come back in her eyes.
That's great. That's fantastic when you can actually do that for somebody and help somebody who's been struggling for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
And you're helping that person get their life back, and it's so rewarding in all for everybody. It's a win-win everywhere. So that's great.
Actually, I want to say one more because I'm really, really happy about this one as well. And I just worked with 2 people recently, and a couple, and the man came to me. They both had anxiety in the relationship, and they were on the verge of breaking up, and they both came to me, and we resolved both their anxieties, and they're now talking about getting married.
Wow.
Which is incredible. They've gone from being totally anxious around each other and thinking, or they've been together a long time, it just wasn't working, and they weren't, in their words, they weren't working as a team. And literally within a few weeks, literally 5 or 6 weeks, they're now together, strong as a team, much more strength as a family, and they've actually announced to their friends they're going to get married.
That's fantastic. So brilliant. That's really nice. Nice, 2 lovely uplifting stories.
Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. That's what I love. Love helping people. Yeah, love helping people. Hate seeing people suffer. Hate it with a passion.
Yes.
When I know it's not necessary.
Yeah, and so many people out there that are. I mean,
yes,
there's so many people living from a fear, suffering and victim mentality unnecessarily, and and it's only because of what they've learned or what they've been told that keeps them there. But actually, as you and I well know, we can literally get rid of that, whether it's pain or whether it's emotional or mental trauma issues, or just general beliefs that you have that were not working for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this week I've been really busy actually. I've had a young lady come to me she was suffering from, kept getting bouts of depression. And so so she come to me and we talked about, what was going on for her and why she kept getting it. And it's sort of, actually, she believed, because she had this belief that depression was being caused by this and this. And I sort of had to point out it wasn't. And when we actually got into the process, it was just something from when she was really young. So it's when she was 4.5 years old, and she was basically kept being left alone by her dad when he went to work. And so that alone feeling of the depression feeling kept getting kicked in, because every time someone left her, it triggered her, and she kept getting down, kept getting depressed. And once I'd switched the memory and all of the associations and the beliefs around her being alone at that moment, her depression pretty much instantly went there and then, just giggling on the sofa. So that's probably one of the best results I've had this week. I've had lots of other ones, but that's probably been my most successful and the happiest one, because I know that this has been troubling this this particular person for quite a long time. I'd actually probably say probably quite a long time. I'm talking years.
Yeah.
So to be able to remove that it was about an hour, I think, and that So yeah, that was really, really good. I've also got rid of a few traumas as well. So my week's been really productive, and I've helped quite a few people. And I've been looking on getting this clinic open that we're going to be opening hopefully very, very soon. So yeah, all in all, been a good week.
Brilliant, fantastic. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, great. So we're going to get into, like I said, the body of the podcast. It's about grief. And so do you want to lead the way and tell us what your thoughts are on grief?
So I'm just going to pre-frame this, guys, by saying that what I'm about to say about grief will be the complete opposite of what you've been taught, and will go against all traditional, alternative, and any other therapy that's out there. And there's a reason why that's going to happen, is because if you actually want to solve your grief, you've got to do something different. Grief is not what people think it is. I've been working with grief for many, many years, ever since I first started in this business, because grief actually causes a lot of pain for people. And it creates pain generally in the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the chest. And grief normally gets lodged in those places. And I've been working with grief for a long time, and I've learned how to release it easily and quickly for people. And one of the biggest myths about grief is that it can't be changed, you can't release it, it's a natural part of life. And that's actually not true. That's not the way it works. It's not the whole truth. So what I'm going to reveal to you today may challenge you a little bit, but you can release your grief and you can move on in life. So the first thing I want to cover is the two myths about grief that people have. The first myth is that time is a great healer. This is bollocks.
Yeah.
This
I hate that
does
saying.
not work. What consciously does is it makes you consciously forget about it over time, and you gradually consciously stop thinking about it, but it's still stuck in your unconscious, and gets triggered from time to time when you see the photo of that person, or when if it's a relationship, for instance, when you hear the song that you had with that person. As soon as you hear that song, you get reminded instantly. One of my triggers for one of my exes was seeing Greggs the Bakers. Over here in England, we have a baker's called Greggs, and at the time I was dating a girl who was in Nottingham, and Greggs was only in Nottingham at that time. It wasn't anywhere else that I knew of. It wasn't in Chelmsford or Essex. The
That explains why you were in tears the other day eating a sausage roll.
That would explain what it was. I was flooded. But you said you weren't going to mention that. That's harsh. That used to trigger me a lot, just eating Greggs the Bakers, because it reminded me of her all the time. And so little things like that can be triggers. It doesn't trigger me at all now. I actually kind of smile when I think about that, because it's so nuts in my head. I'm like, that's mental. Yeah. But it's those sort of things that actually do that. And so time is a great healer is not actually accurate. It just kind of makes you forget about it, and it drips into your unconscious, but you get triggered from time to time, and it still holds you back in life. So time is a great healer, not a great belief system to have. The second myth that people have is that grief is a process. Now, this comes from a traditional therapy point of view. You go through a 5-stage process when you grieve. And the thing about that is not everyone goes through those stages. Some people take longer to go through those stages than others. And that's actually not accurate. Those stages you go through, anger, denial, whatever the other 4 or 5 are, whatever it is, 3 are, they actually happen because those are surface emotions that are coming out. They're not actually the root cause of your grief. So people think that the grief is about the other person. That's another myth. People think the grief is about the person you've lost. And tragically, it's not about that at all, generally. This is the bit that may challenge you guys, by the way. I'll get more onto that when I talk about the root cause. But we're not grieving for the person who's passed away, only in initial stages of grief. So there are actually 2 main parts to grief. There is the natural grief that we all go through, and that period of time, that actually leaves your body naturally. So the natural grief that is healthy and normal, that all human beings go through, comes on and leaves within a period of 4 weeks to 3 months, depending on how the grief was created. If it's someone's past, whether they had a long-term illness or whether it was a shock or sudden.
Would the length of the relationship play out on that?
The length of the relationship, possibly, but generally it's the amount of triggers involved with a relationship and things like that, and your belief in yourself and things. But usually within 4 weeks to 3 months is the average period of time that most people would grieve. There may be a slight different version of that. Perhaps if you've lost a child, you can grieve. You might grieve for 3 to 6 months. Yeah. However, even so, that's still not totally, you're not totally grieving for your child at that point. So the average time is about 4 weeks to 3 months. Any longer than that, you're no longer naturally grieving, you're now in fight and flight. So any time period after about 3 months, you're now in a fight and flight state. And the fight and flight state is not who you are. You're in fight and flight. That means you're perceiving danger somewhere. However, it doesn't manifest that way. It manifests as anger or hurt or how am I going to cope or grief or beating yourself up that you couldn't do anything. One of my clients that I'm treating at the moment, a lovely, lovely lady, her son passed away. He was doing lots of drugs. He passed away a few years ago, and she's never been able to get over it. She had years of counselling, never resolved it, could never get past the grief, and so could never move on in her life.
Yes.
And within 3 weeks, when she first spoke about the grief with her son, she would just burst into tears constantly. Now she talks about it, and she's not bursting into tears.
Yeah, I mean,
she's not getting overwhelmed. The emotion was too strong. It was too much.
I think that's a lot because I mean, you see a lot of people. There's people that I know of have lost people through suicides and other things, and they're constantly reliving it over and over and over again. And you know, you feel for them, but it's very difficult for them to see or for you to be able to tell them that's what's really going on because they're so enrolled in it and they really, really feel that they're really, really living that experience. And I switched off a load yesterday with a girl, and as soon as she got that realisation that it was to do with letting go of the father's death, all of a sudden she was just freed instantly. It was absolutely, I saw it right in front of me. Yeah. But once she'd stopped blaming herself or feeling guilty for her father's death and having she instantly changed. Yeah, instantly. I mean, it was a huge shift. But
grief holds you back from so many things, and we don't realise it. We often think we've dealt with the grief. We often feel we've been through it, and we've gone through the 5 cycles of grief that most people know about these days because they always look it up on the internet. And we think we've gone through that process and dealt with it, and we actually haven't. It's still stuck in our systems, and it creates lots of different problems, or then we develop a problem later on, and we don't realise the grief has created it. Yeah. In fact, I was out with my mum a few weeks back. And one of our relatives bumped into us, and I don't know this person very well, it's more on my mum's side. And she was saying that she developed asthma a couple of years ago and telling her about that. And I know exactly what happened 2 years ago. Her dad passed away. Yeah. And I know that is going to be what's hit the lungs. As I said, grief often hits your chest. It's hit her lungs and hit her bronchi, asthma bronchi. It's hit her bronchi, and that's caused the asthma to come on. So grief often gets suppressed in our systems because we thought we've had a cry, we've dealt with it, we may have cried for a while, we feel we're moving on, but the actual emotion is stuck in our system. But it's not the emotion of grief. As I say, the natural amount of emotion of grief releases from our body naturally, but something keeps us in fight and flight, and this is the real root cause of grief. Now this again may challenge quite a few people, but in every person over the years where I found the grief, the fastest way I switch it off is by dealing with this one root cause, because we are no longer grieving for the person that's gone or the relationship that's ended. We're actually grieving for ourselves.
Yes,
we've actually
totally
taken it personally and we've made it mean something about us. And the main emotional response in grief is guilt.
Yeah.
We feel guilty that we weren't there at the time. We feel guilty that we didn't do enough.
Or how we treated them before. Guilty we treated them before. Yeah.
We feel ashamed that we couldn't hang on to the relationship, or we wonder how we're going to cope without that person.
And also, yesterday, my client yesterday was guilty for letting go. She felt guilty just for letting go.
Yeah. For letting
go and moving on. That's where she was guilty. Once I cleared that off, then she was free of it.
And that's one of the biggest blocks of letting go of grief, because we are taught we should hang on to grief, that grief's a natural part of life. And yes, it is, but not to hold the grief forever. Grief is a natural part of life, but it only lasts for so long. But we've been taught in society that it can last forever, and time is a great healer. And you go through these natural states, these emotions of anger and denial, and then injustice, and you might get angry at God or angry, but no. You go through that if you're running guilt and shame about the scenario. If you switch that off, you won't run any of those emotions. They will all disappear very quickly, because those are a fight and flight state. They're not grief. Grief dissipates naturally, and one of the biggest blocks people have is feeling guilty if they actually stop grieving.
Yeah, that's what I find.
They feel guilty about no longer grieving for that person. That if you think about it though, that person wouldn't actually want you to be grieving. That person would actually want you to move on and be happy in life. And if they were here, they would tell you that. If it's a loss of a loved one, they would be here and tell you that. Logically, you probably understand that, but emotionally, you have a different response. So one of the first things you need to switch off is the guilt about letting go. And once you do that, a lot of the grief will just dissipate anyway.
Yeah.
And the beauty is you'll then be able to move on with your life and be happy and be successful and attract a new relationship or meet a new partner. I treated a lady a few years ago and she couldn't move on from the death of a partner. She couldn't have the pictures out on the side. She couldn't go on holiday on her own. She really, really struggled. And within a few weeks, we switched that off. She brought the big picture out that she had of them together, put it back on her mantelpiece. She went on holiday. She did loads of things, and she had her life back again.
Yeah, I mean, I remember work. Obviously, I lost a child, and that was tough for myself, and it took me a long while to go. But the thing that was holding me there for many years was the guilt, and that did drive me to behave in ways that I probably can't connect with now. But I did. But now I know that's gone. I can see it was the guilt. It was the guilt that was driving my anger. It was the guilt that was driving my drinking. It was the guilt of not being able to move on. It was the guilt of me playing the victim, and it was just all the guilt, the stuff that really made me do that. And fortunately enough, that's not running anymore, and I can look back and see that. But it was the guilt that ultimately drove, because it's not only is it the guilt that stops you from moving on, but it also makes you behave in a certain way.
Yes, that's right. It alters your behaviour, and then you can behave in multiple different ways depending on how the guilt is created or what the guilt's about.
Yeah. I mean, that guilt can ultimately also drive you to depression. I mean,
yes,
you can become so guilty that you don't want to face the world, or you can't face the world or face people, or
you'll feel very ashamed about it, and you won't want to face anyone, and you'll feel so bad about it.
And I think the other thing as well is people may think that it's wrong for them to be happy when their husband or someone close to them has passed away, because they're going to think, well, how can look at her? How can she be happy when Derek's just passed?
Yeah,
and this is the problem that we have, and so we get caught in that place where we really, really want to move on, but we think we believe that we need to be down and sad and show it because that's what society or people want from, and that gets you trapped.
And one of my blocks when I suffered a grief of a relationship, someone that I loved very, very much, and sadly it didn't work out, but I was actually holding on to trauma, and I know what I'm doing, okay? So I know this stuff, and I was holding on to trauma because I wanted her to suffer. I was actually holding on to the guilt and the shame because I wanted her to suffer, and it's nonsense because she wouldn't suffer by my emotions, but that's what the unconscious does sometimes.
It's that old saying, it's about injecting yourself with poison hoping that the other person gets hurt.
Hoping the other person gets hurt, exactly. And that's what you're literally doing. You're literally causing yourself to suffer hoping the other person does, as if we have that power over people. We don't. No. The only people who can cause themselves to suffer is the person themselves. And that's
crazy when we do that, because I used to do that. I used to do that all the time, and I used to think, and then it's not until afterwards you think, I'm absolutely insane.
It was insane. I was absolute insanity.
It's absolute insanity to really believe that I can do that. And then it was the injecting the poison into your arm, hoping the other person. When I heard that, that's when I was like, oh my God, now I get it. What am I doing? What have I done? How have I been acting like this for all many years? How stupid am I? I'll get me coat.
But it feels very real when you're in it. It does feel very real, and for me, it felt so real when I was in it, and that actually unconsciously stopped me for a few months to resolve the issue, and I kind of knew it was there, but I still didn't want to do it, and I was sabotaging myself. So even someone who knows what they're doing about healing things, we can still sabotage ourselves. It happens.
It doesn't help, because I think there's so much that we've been told about grief, and there's been so much we've been told about how you're expected to behave during a time of grieving.
Oh yes,
and so ultimately you'll watch like TV shows, and you'll see how they're all turning up to the funeral, how they act and how they behave, and and that for somehow you can't move on from that. And, you know, you'll see scenes where, you know, the husband's passed 2 years on and that person's still in the room going, oh, I've lost Derek. And, you know, I keep using Derek. I don't know. I've not three.
You don't know who Derek
poor
is.
Derek, he's been
Derek. No,
3 times now. But,
you're not grieving over Derek.
No. But, you know, when you see that, but the problem is that becomes an unconscious thing that we pick up, especially for the TV. I mean, like I said, that's why I don't watch TV anymore, because of the learnings and the teachings and the unconscious programming. But that's the problem is that people have that perception of that's how they need to be and behave. It's like a construct that's been given to you to behave in a certain way, which actually isn't really anything like the truth of real grief at all.
Well, you're not being you.
Yes.
So whenever you're in any fight and flight state, you're not being you. And most grief is the fight and flight state. And when I lost my dad about 3 years ago, I've looked from everywhere, I can't find him. When he passed away, everyone told me how I would feel. Everyone said, oh, it's going to hit you eventually. Well, I'd actually already dealt with my grief before he passed, because he had an illness for a long time. And I went through that grieving process, and I used DTO and switched it off before he passed away. And so I didn't go to that grief process. I didn't go through the fight and flight part. I went to the natural parts of the fact my dad wasn't here anymore. But I didn't go into fight and flight afterwards about it, because I'd already dealt with it. But everyone told me how it's going to hit you and you're going to, you know, miss him and all this stuff. And I didn't have that. And people couldn't understand. They couldn't grasp that wasn't a problem for me, because I'd actually dealt with the grief previous, because you can pre-grieve for people, especially when people are ill for a long time.
I did that with my nan. She passed about September.
Yeah.
And I'd already started working with you then.
Yeah.
And I was already training and doing the DTO stuff. So when my nan passed, I love my nan very, very much. But hardly had any impact on me whatsoever.
Yeah.
Hardly any, pretty much zero. But what I was able to do is be able to celebrate her life and carry on with my own life, because, you know, what I've learned from my own personal experience, but keeping that and running that just doesn't work in any way, shape or form. It just makes you miserable, everybody else miserable. It just doesn't work on any way. But just going back, I did pre-grieve, because I knew she was suffering from really bad dementia and stuff. But when it happened, I pre-grieved and also switched off a lot of the stuff before that. So
yeah, and if you can do that, great. But it does hold you back in life.
Not that's going to help our viewers, but
no.
That's what I did.
But it's that people know sometimes you do pre-grieve, and it hits you before someone's even gone or before anything's even happened.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, a lot of people think that if you're not grieving, or if you don't go through that grieving process, it means you don't care. No, that's not what it means. What it means is you're not making it about you. A lot of grief is, as I say, fight and flight, and that means we've made it about us. So if you listen to anyone's language or listen to your own language after that few weeks or few months period, you'll be saying things like, how can I cope? I can't go on anymore.
I miss him.
Yeah. They're all I statement. They're all about you, not the person who's gone. I actually heard this on TV once a few years back now. A mum had ran away, and her daughter was really worried because her mum needed medication. And the daughter was being interviewed, and she's going, Mum, please come back. I need you. Mum, I can't do this without you. It was all about her. It wasn't about her mum at all. The language wasn't about her mum. And she wasn't doing it on purpose, but unconsciously, she was in fight and flight about how she was going to survive in her life. And the sad truth is that grief is a natural, normal part of life. And you should take it as a natural, normal part of life. Yes, in the first few weeks,
grieve
it's upsetting.
the person, don't grieve yourself.
Exactly, very good. Great way of saying it. Grieve the person, not... If you grieve the person, it will drop out naturally. When you're still running it, you're actually grieving for yourself.
Yeah.
And I know that may be very difficult.
And that's why it's hard to let go.
It is, that's right. It's about you.
It's about you, and while you're still alive and you're still running, you're going to keep grieving, you're going to keep yourself trapped
in... All my grief was about... My dad was about me. All the grief I had with the relationship was about me. I'm not good enough. I can't live without she's my soulmate. My dad was I wasn't good enough as a son. I can't cope without him. I need him to do this and that.
What happens if this happens and he's not there?
Exactly.
To help?
All of those things. But they were all about me. And most grief that is there for a long time is about that. So I'll give you a prime example of this, of a lady that I treated. She had to give her I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but she had to let go of her dog. The dog didn't die, but it didn't work within the family, and she had to give it away to someone else. and she really struggled with this. She was really grieving. She loved this dog, and the only reason she had to give it away because it didn't get on well with men, and there were 2 men in the family. So they tried everything, but in the end she had to give the dog away. And I bumped into her up the field several times where I used to live, walking the dogs. And she would tell me this story over and over again. And I don't interfere. I don't say to people, would you like to let go of things? I wait to come to me. But this lady did this 3 times to me, and I never bumped into her before or afterwards. Yeah. So I knew there was a reason for this. So I just
the universe working in its magical ways again?
It was, yeah. And it always does. Always works.
It always works.
And I said, would you like to let go? She said, oh, God, yes. And it took me... How long do you think it took me, Steve, to let go of her grief?
I'm going to say... Haven't we spoke about this person already on 2 other podcasts?
I don't know. We spoke about the law of attraction training. That's when I spoke about it.
Oh, okay. I think we've also might have talked about it. I'm going to have possibly. A stab. I'm going to probably say about 20 minutes, I would imagine.
5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
If that.
So that should trump my 19 minutes with the trauma then,
yeah,
is it?
It was probably...
Damn!
It was probably near about 30 seconds.
Really?
Because all it was one guilt, and the rest was a couple of questions. It was one guilt that she had to let the dog go. And as soon as I released the guilt, the grief went. And she was then able to do what she wanted to do but couldn't. She was then able to go back home, call the owner who she'd given the dog to and find out the dog was okay, which he was. And she was then able to go and buy another dog to keep the other dog they already owned company. But she was blocked from doing that moving forwards in her life because she felt so guilty.
Yeah.
She thought she was grieving. No, she was actually feeling guilty.
So I mean... It's a really, really, really great point, and and I think a lot of people don't see that because it's the guilt feelings are the same as grief feelings. They're very, very similar, and
they feel very similar.
So you still think you're grieving, but actually not.
Yes.
And so and
also the guilt lies underneath the anger.
Yeah.
It lies underneath the other 5 things that counsellors say you go through. The guilt's underneath those things, so you don't see them.
Yeah.
You might see the anger, you might see the denial, but. Well, you can't see denial because you deny it.
Yeah,
but
I didn't see that.
I didn't see it coming. But the guilt is underneath those things,
yeah.
and sometimes it's really subtle. You don't know it's not always as obvious as people make it out.
The other thing as well which we haven't covered is that alone feeling, because sometimes when you have somebody that's really close to you, or if you and your little dog, sometimes that can be triggered as well, and so that feeling of being alone, which is the driver of most depressions and stuff. And
the alone feeling is the biggest driver of depression. It's the biggest emotion under everything that drives depression, and multiple other problems.
Yeah.
But yes, with grief, especially if a loved one dies,
absolutely.
or a relationship breaks up, you then feel alone, and you then question, am I ever going to be with someone again? How am I going to live without this person? But that actually comes from an alone feeling.
Yeah.
That comes from you feeling not lonely, alone. I want to distinguish the difference. There is a difference between being alone and lonely. Lonely means you have no friends. Alone means there is no one and nothing. There's a big difference, and that is the worst thing. You can make friends. You can go and meet people. If you've got blocks that they can be cleared, but you can do that. But the alone feeling is the worst feeling that can possibly be there. And once you find that and switch that off, then you can heal and move forwards. And actually, there was an article on Facebook about one of the reasons, and they're kind of fairly accurate with this. One of the reasons that men are in their later life go into depression is because they feel alone. Because men do not socialise like women do. They don't make friends like women do. And women can have lots of friends, and so they don't feel as lonely. But women can still feel alone. So you can have hundreds of friends and still feel alone.
Yeah.
You could have 2 or 3 really great friends and still feel alone, but you're not necessarily lonely. It's the alone feeling that's the problem. And a lot of men do have that alone feeling because of the way we operate, the way we are, and the way we function in life.
And also the way that we deal with our own problems.
And the way
because ultimately we know, and we've discussed this in other podcasts, is we try and solve our problem from the problem, and then wonder why we can't solve them, and then we start making up all this stuff about ourselves, that we're not good enough, or there's something wrong with us, or we're crazy, or we're mad, and then that leads to other things, and so that makes us feel a little bit, it damage your pride, or your how proud you are, or your ego, or the rest of it, and it can make you feel alone, and stops you from wanting to be with other people out of inferiority and insecurity.
Well, and the main alone feeling with men is that we go inside our heads to work it out.
Yeah.
And when we go into our heads to work it out, we're even more alone. and that drives everything you just said.
Yes.
But it comes from going into the head to try and solve it yourself because we're the man and we're supposed to do it. But men do that with grief as well.
Yeah.
And they can actually get stuck with the grief, and it can cause a depression because they've gone into their head to try and resolve it and go, well, this makes no sense, it's not logical, what am I doing, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And they keep analysing it, and that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is to analyse what's wrong with you. Doing that, you end up spinning yourself in circles, or you go, oh, well, I know what's causing it, that's it, and then you're stuck with it because you can't change it.
Yeah.
Because what you've come up with doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
You've got an answer for why it's there. And it's the same thing with grief. We do the same thing with grief. We go, well, I know why, because this person's passed.
Great.
No, it's not. I know why, because I'm angry because this shouldn't have happened. I know why, because the hospital didn't catch it in time. That's why I'm still grieving.
Yeah.
And that's very common as well, you know.
But that's just what I said in the last podcast, is people make shit up, believe the shit that they've made up, and then behave accordingly to it, and then wonder why the problem isn't solved.
That's right, yeah. We make the stuff up in our head. We're trying to find the answers because we want answers. As human beings, we're kind of trained to find the answer. And unfortunately, that's a really bad way of doing it. If we could just let go, that would be much easier. But we are trained to find answers and do puzzles, and all our lives we're designed to solve
problem
puzzles.
solving.
We solve problems that we're in school. We're constantly being taught to solve problems. So we think we can do the same thing with the mind and our emotions. It doesn't work with the mind and the emotions. Yeah. It's great for puzzles. It's great for Sudoku. It's great for the crossword.
Yeah.
Your mind and emotions are not a puzzle. They are not a game. Do not try and treat them like a puzzle and a game. You will come unstuck.
Yes. Well, as you well know, there's two parts of the brain. Obviously, there's the logical part of the brain.
Yeah.
And our emotions, our feelings. So if you're trying to, and they're two different parts of the brain with two different operating systems. One's we're using language and logic, and the other one's using feelings and emotions. So if you're trying to use your logic to fix your emotions, or you're trying to use your emotions to fix your logic, that's where you're going to come massively unstuck, because that's a square peg in a round hole, and you can bang that all day long and it's not going to happen, because logically the logical part of the brain cannot solve the emotional part of the brain, and vice versa. And unfortunately we're not taught that, we're not told that, and when you actually understand that and know that then allowed you to say, well, there's no point in even thinking about it. Yeah. There's no point in even thinking about it, because I'm not even going to come up with the answer, and I'm never going to know the answer, because they're two disparate systems in your mind.
Yeah, that's right. And as Steve said, that you can't solve it with either one of those things. Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thing that created it. Yeah. So if your thoughts create a problem, you can't solve the problem with your thoughts. So what we do with DTO is we don't try to analyse the problem, solve it. We just switch it off.
Yes.
And all you need to know with grief, there's only one thing you need to know with grief. If you are running it for longer than 3 months, you are in fight and flight, and there's a guilt or a shame in the way, or an alone feeling somewhere. Yeah. And by finding that and using DTO to switch it off, or the multiple ones, because there can be multiple alone or guilts under there.
They generally are.
And they generally are.
Yeah.
Then switch those off, and your grief will lift, and you'll move forwards.
Yeah.
The one thing that will hold you back, the one thing that's going to stop you from releasing that grief is, as we said earlier on, the belief that you should be grieving, that you shouldn't let go of it. And the other belief that often kicks in is, well, if I let go of this, I'm going to let go of the person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember them anymore. And we hold the grief because we want to remember the person. And that's not true. What actually happens is, you holding the grief actually separates you from the person.
Yes.
And all you remember is the negatives. You can't remember the positive times. Once you let go of the grief, you remember all of the positives, you remember all of the great times, and you can move on and be happy and start living your life again.
Yeah, so I mean, just as an exercise for anybody that's listening, and if you are experiencing grief, where our thoughts go out to you, and you get our support, mentally and emotionally and spiritually. But if it was just to shut your eyes and think about the situation of the person you loved, and just basically get in touch with that feeling that you're experiencing, and just ask yourself that simple question: is it a feeling of guilt? Is it a feeling of shame, or is it an alone feeling? And then if you have those running, then it's not grief, it's one of those things, and then you can reach out to one of the DTO experts, or someone, or an experienced therapist, who can switch that off for you. Now you'll no longer be grieving, or what you perceive to be grieving.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes the first emotion that pops up might be anger, and the guilt might be underneath the anger.
Yeah.
So if you can't find it, if you come up with anger or fear or something else, the guilt or the shame will be hiding underneath it. And in which case, then you will need an experienced practitioner to help you work through that.
Yes.
But in any time I've ever worked with grief, and I say I've been doing it for 20 years, it's never what people think it is. And it holds so many people back and causes so many problems, so many illnesses and pain. and you don't have to live that way. And what's really tragic is it just stops you ultimately living your life and being who you really are. And you don't need to do that. I know I said it held me back for a few months, so I do understand. And no, we totally understand if you're grieving. We're sorry if you've lost someone or had a breakup. We're not trying to make light of that. It is a very sad time. But if you're holding it for a long period of time, you're not being you. And all we want you to do is be you.
Yeah.
All we want is you to be happy, move on, and enjoy your life. And that's all your loved one would want to. And anyone who genuinely loves you in your life. So if you are suffering grief, please don't continue to do so. Please take what we've said and understand what we've said and recognise that you're not grieving anymore. You're in fight and flight and you're just feeling guilty about something. And if you can understand that and get that into your system, then you can start to move forwards and you can start to heal.
Great. So I think that's brilliant. So I think we'll probably wrap up there. I think you've covered it in great detail, and as always, Jonathan has given us a great understanding of what's really going on with for people that are going through grief or not going through grief or whatever is currently, whatever your problem is regarding to losing someone or in a relationship. So, like I said, we're going to probably finish up for today. We're going to probably do another podcast, which we spoke about, which was about illness and disease. And I don't know if you want to go there or whether you want to do the law of attraction follow-up. I think
we'll do the illness and disease next time. And then we're very excited to do law of attraction part 2.
Law of attraction part 2,
because
yes.
it's very popular. We've been getting requests to do more on law of attraction. And I had no idea it was so popular. So we are going to do law of attraction part 2, the revenge.
The Revenge.
This time it's back for good.
Yes.
And it's starring Rambo and but yeah, we will be doing Law of Attraction Part 2. But next week we're going to cover illness and disease.
Yeah, great. Okay, so that'll be a good one. Like I said last week, I think it'll be something I would be interested in because it's it's a fascinating subject. And knowing what you do and knowing what I know, there's so much to it, and there's so many myths around illness and diseases, and I think it might actually challenge a few people's belief systems. But
it probably will. Yes,
but anyway, so if you're interested in reaching out and you've got a problem that you need to be solved, or you're suffering from depression, anxiety, you're suffering post PTSD or trauma, or if you've generally got chronic pain or illness issues, you can contact myself on healingthemind.co.uk, and you can also reach out to Jonathan on decodingpain.com. And so we're going to probably leave it there. If you want to email us, by the way, you can email insideouteffect@gmail.com, where we will pick up your email and get back to you in confidence. And like we said last week, if there's a specific subject that you would like us to cover, that's not normal, or an issue that you're dealing with, or you're what's the word I'm looking for, that you're currently running but need some help with it, then please email into us or reply on the YouTube video and let us know.
Yeah.
And then we can maybe cover that. So anything else you want to say before we leave, my friend?
No, that's it. Have a great week, everybody. And we look forward to speaking to you next week. And thank you to everyone who has reached out to us through these podcasts and expressed their love of what we're talking about and what we're doing. We really appreciate that, and we're glad that sharing information is helping a lot of people and helping them to understand and giving them the confidence to reach out and know it can be solved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are reaching out from us, and because we can give them a solution and we can literally remove the problem, help them with the problem they're dealing with. So anyway, it's goodbye from me. I will see you next week on the Inside Out Effect podcast. So ta-da for now, and Jonathan?
Take care, everyone. Have a great week.
Have a great week. Ta-da.